Fred and Maestro.
So I think I just heard Natalie talking about your previous appearance at the Met in Nürnberg nearly 25 years ago. And first, welcome back.
Thank you.
But also, I'm wondering what this experience has been like, especially this orchestra. Are you encountering essentially the same group that you encountered a generation ago, or has there been a change?
Well, I would say that first of all, in preparing to come here, I was still imagining that this would be James Levine's orchestra. He did this piece many times. It's quite warm if you want to take this off. So I thought, I'd have a whole orchestra of people who know the piece inside out. They've done several revivals. And that turned out to be not the case at all. First of all, there are several people who have retired from the orchestra. And during the pandemic, you all heard about it. And there's been a tremendous amount of turnover. So I'll give you an example. The leader of the second violins is a young South American boy, terrific player. But, the Meistersinger was completely foreign to him. The leader of the violas, Shmuel Katz, he Israeli boy who has been at the Met for quite some time, but he always avoided the Meistersinger, and now it was his turn to play it. And several woodwinds, the first clarinet, first bassoon, the first flute, all playing for this piece for the first time. So I found myself in a position where I was having to actually teach the piece to a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And for the conductor, when you're working on this piece, it's quite something because, of course, as you can imagine, the fear of never getting to the end. You laugh about it, but let me tell you, it's really serious business when you're working on it and trying to plan. Now I need to get through this, and I need to get there. I need to get at least that far, and it's constant strategic thinking. But we made it. We did make it. I have a wonderful cast, but there are stresses there too. My Hans Sachs appeared 9 or 10 days before the first night, while the others rehearsed for 3 weeks before. As you know, Hans Sachs sings quite a lot during the evening, and so he and I have worked together on different things over the years, but never this. But we have a natural feeling, and so that absolutely helped. We recently did La Fanciulla del West, Jack Rance. But I don't think there are any cowboy residue left in his Hans Sachs performance. But he has what's a very I'll start with him because for the conductor, a piece like Die Meistersinger it's many things, but it is a conversation piece with moments of contemplation. And the moments of contemplation are all his. Nobody else gets those moments where he's alone and can just communicate to the audience what he's really thinking. Things which are very profound, a guy who's not in the first flush of youth, who sees a newcomer, firebrand, with new ideas, with new ways of thinking about music, about poetry. And although his colleagues are all scandalized by the methods, by the ways that Walter presents himself and sings his song, Sachs sees something, and he says something very important. He says, but you have to listen carefully. You have to, don't impose your rules on something that plays by another set of rules. It's a very, very interesting, I think almost political statement, but it's a beautiful human statement, that the power to listen to somebody else, though he may be completely different from you. This today resonates very, very strongly. It's a very, very strong and I think moving message, but it's also to see the struggle for someone who sees his days as numbered and has to pass on, has to pass the baton, if you like, to the new generation. He doesn't get the girl, and he could. All those things, the sacrifices that he makes for the future benefit of the next generation. And these are very, very beautiful things. Also, to see how Sachs sees the world, that because somebody is different, because somebody has a new message, a new way, causes a situation which then goes on to cause a big uproar. Of course, there's Beckmesser in the middle, and I'll get to him in a minute. But the world has gone crazy. The world is just ready to go crazy. He saw a little bit of that craziness with his Meisters. They really get hot under the collar, in their reaction to Walter. And then the chorus and the scene, the fight scene, is just extraordinary for its violence, also musical violence. If you look at the page, certainly when I look at the music there, I just want to kill myself because it's so complicated, and to get it together is you can pray all you want, but it's up to the gods really whether it goes right. But all those things give food for thought for this man who's very wise and who's a poet but also a realist. And he comments on the potential for violence and how people just in a matter of a few moments can just completely lose it and cause all kinds of chaos. And what's going on in the world? And then, but through the appreciation of the new, through the power of seeing nature, he says maybe it was a goblin. He blames it all on a little goblin that put all these ideas in people's heads, and it was just stardust or something. But basically he's saying that there's a higher power somehow that is ruling everything, whatever that is. I'm not here to give a religious discussion. But sorry, I didn't finish yet. This is a long to say that somebody like Michael Folle, who, I don't know if you've seen the performance, but the freedom he has with the text. I mean, first of all, it's one of the most difficult roles to learn, because the acreage is, it just so much of it. And then how to figure out how to, from a stamina point of view, how to pace yourself. But he has a way of delivering it like he's making it up on the spot. And in fact, now that I've done 4 performances with him, he kind of is making up it on the spot, because no performance is like any other. I'm just having to, you know, sort of navigate with him. And because it's with the words are taking him in different places. And of course, being a German speaker, a native German speaker, he has developed over 10 years singing this role a wonderful, you know, heartwarming way of portraying this character. I do speak German, I mean, not as well as he does. And I would recommend for any conductor who has dreams of conducting this piece speak German. Because the whole rhythm of the piece, there are two approaches to the musicality of the piece. There's the vertical, which is, I'll translate that to the traditional. The dum 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 dum, and things like dum 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 dum, and things like this. And then there's which is not vertical. It's the new. You know, I see Wagner himself as being the two people. He's Hans Sachs and he's Walter. And he's looking, he's playing both roles somehow in the composition of this piece. The homage to the past and the masters of the past. But the firebrand that is the new, the one who dares to show the way for the future. And in fact, I mean, he did show the way. The whole, when you think of what came after Wagner, between, you know, Strauss and Mahler, and the Second Viennese School, and well, you name it. And I think that even today the impact is still keenly felt. But I see these two giants and what they represent as being the different faces of Richard himself.
First of all, let me comment. I think you can assume that much of this crowd has seen it or will be seeing it this week.
Okay.
These people are, they aren't going to let this pass them by.
Okay.
Do a show of hands.
Oh, show of hands? Who's seen the Meistersinger? Okay. Now you just talked about the importance of language to this piece, and is it in fact, is that particular to this piece in particular, or does that go for all of Wagner?
I think the words go for opera in general, whether it's an Italian opera, French opera, or German opera. In this opera, to get back to what I said about the vertical and the horizontal, that which goes in waves rather than in blocks. You have to be really keen to appreciate what Wagner, I mean, if I read to you a little bit, like of what the vertical is, for instance, and how he sets it. The first scene is, you have Walter, who's all, I must tell this girl that I'm in love with her. And so his music is, verweilt, ein Wort, ein einzig Wort, is wait, I just want to say a word. And that's completely modern. It has nothing, but Eva answers. She says, in my kerchief, look, I left it behind, she says to her, to Magdalena. She says, mein Brusttuch, schau, wo liegt's im Ort. You see the difference, the sort of the pinpointed rhythm. And Magdalena answers, oh, you forgetful child, that means I have to go look. And she says, vergesslich Kind, nun heißt es such. And you hear the little pointed way of singing. That is a key to this piece. Because if everybody's singing like Walter is singing, then you don't really have the two factions. You don't have the counterweights. And this is very, very important. And of course, everybody wants to sound beautiful when they sing. But you have but and nobody wants to seem like they're a puppet in music. But there's a little bit of puppetry in it because there's a little bit of parody in the piece, in terms of portraying the Nürnberg society and the guilds, and and the rules and the structure. In fact, there are 2 times when the rules are explained in great detail. Now, with David in his little arietta, it goes on for quite a while to explain all the different kinds of verses. There are all the different kinds of rhymes, and how you must obey this rule and that rule. He kind of is the compendium for, in his little arietta, we have the compendium for all the devices that are used in Die Meistersinger, musical devices. Absolutely wonderful. I'll give you a little show of that. He likens his job. David is the assistant to the cobbler, to Hans Sachs. So he's a privileged apprentice, but he makes shoemaking and making poetry sort of come together, and when putting the needle through the leather, and he goes in the vocal line, it's but in the orchestra you get this. Now listen. Do you hear the and the back and forth, and then going back and forth in the leather. Okay, you get things like that. Yeah, he says, making shoes and poetry, I learned them at the same time, both shoemaking and poetry. And he goes in the vocal lines. You hear the difference between marcato, the marked singing, making shoes, and then poetry, and this, and then I learn them together, and I make the letter smooth by hammering it. So put that together. He says, I learn vowels, and then there's a little pizzicato here in the strings with consonants. And you see how the little pictures of delineation and he talks about it very, very clearly. There's what is smooth and what is hit. And you'd be surprised when you're listening to a great opera singer. Of course, we love, if we've been, we appreciate in Lohengrin, in Elsa's line, the legato. But if you go, Zwang vor Klage, Mühe oder Zweck, das Beste schwert, das Jeke schweißt, and you have Mime in Siegfried. I mean, it's a whole different thing. But he'll sing legato, Mime will, when he wants to be friendly to Siegfried. Mein Sohn, all that kind of stuff. So the use of different articulation to express different states of emotion are very much the material that goes in to make Die Meistersinger. It's much more complex here, although the music sounds more friendly. It's a work that's it's a piece of craftsmanship. So it has artificial elements because I said it's almost a parody of a medieval town, and the rhythms and how the society works. And so it's all, you know, so that it can contrast with the rhapsodizing of the young knight Walter. I don't even know what your question was.
But I think you are talking about ways. I mean, you've mentioned Nina, you've mentioned Elsa, but I think what you're saying is the variety of these forms of musical discourse in response to the word, to the text, or
yes.
as it reflects the text, is perhaps unique to this opera.
Absolutely, to the degree that it is, and word painting, und coloratur, you know, coloratur. You have to. That's Monteverdi, really. Monteverdi would do that kind of thing, you know, there's one of my favorite places is when he says about short and long, and he goes, "Dear kurz, long." So the short, long, and the overly long tone. Und überlang die Schreibung. See that I try to get them to hold as long as possible because my guys, they run out of bow at certain things. but all it's you know, the idea that, I mean, you just laughed a little bit, which is the piece is trying to. You're not going to guffaw at the Meistersinger usually. I mean, there are some funny scenes around Beckmesser, but you wrote me something very nice. It's something about the smiles and recognition and humanity and things like that. That's what Wagner is trying to provoke. He's also he does make fun of people. Of course, the character of Beckmesser has been much discussed. Beckmesser is the town clerk, and he's a pedant. He's a detail man, and he never sees really the big picture. He can't see the forest through the trees, and his musicality is always somehow restless. It never seems to be grounded. And in fact, his expertise is in coloratura, you know. So when he plays the lute, it's blum 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 bling blum bling blum bling bling blum bling blum bling. It sounds like he's lost, but actually he's kind of improvising, and the more notes the better for him. But he misses the beauty, the poetry, the humanity, a character supposedly portraying is a portrait of Hanslick, the famous critic who gave Wagner a very, very rough time. And the name Beckmesser is very funny. Becken is a symbol, becken, and Messer is knife. But if you turn the name around, Mechbesser, Mecken is complaining, and better is better. So he's always somehow, he's a nudge, you know. And so that's how I think of it, as Mechbesser rather than Beckmesser, you know. And I'm sure Wagner meant that, really.
Is he a villain?
Well, you know, when a Sachs is able to see the new and see this firebrand and saying, wow, this kid's got something. And then there's another person who says, oh, it's just terrible. I've never heard anything just like that in my life. You know, that's human nature, I'm afraid. You know, we can call him a villain, but people are like that, aren't they?
Yeah.
So I don't think he's a villain. I think he's a human being made out of a different stuff. And and you know, he even at the beginning you see him trying to avoid the obvious that he has to sing to win the girl, and he's trying to get Wagner to not have the girl also have take part in the decision, you know, because he knows that would that would kill it for him, you know. He's a fascinating character, and we have Johannes Martin Krenzler as. And he's just absolutely terrific with his sort of white hair, and he's a sort of nervous Nelly, isn't he? You know, he's just very, very uptight and restless. And but when he has to come out with the power of the notes, he does have it, which you know he can really he can be mean. It's funny that the hammering. And any reference to Beckmesser at all is somehow discordant, isn't it? And then we get the very baroque circle of fifths. You know, that's all. I mean, it's also all the things you are. It's the same, but that chord, it's almost like a claw. Grabs like that, and especially in the duets, the two duets between Sachs and Beckmesser, you have these two different human beings. This claw is always there somehow. That this life is never right for this guy. It's always something wrong, and it does that. And Wagner brings through this one chord somehow sums up this character. There's a fascinating duality there. You know, the beauty of seeing two completely different human beings, and that's what makes a great duet. Is when you have differences. You know, in opera, when you have even a love duet, if both are just singing the same rhythm, the same way of singing, they need contrast in duets. In a Tristan duet in the second act, I mean, the tenor is he's Errol Flynn, you know, you know, especially if you don't make the big cut that they usually do. He sings with such a heroic abandon, and she is rather sort of soaring, you know, and then finally they come together and sing the love duet. But they have these two different elements that then become one. Here you have two different elements that never become one. They're each other like this, you know, and it's fantastic.
When I wrote you about because I do not go to Meistersinger expecting, as you say, big laughs. It's not Seinfeld, but those guys were making me laugh. Kretzel and Pola. Their interplay. I mean, they're both very good, but they were very, very good together, I thought.
Well, they are in the cast in Bayreuth, and they do it together all over the world.
That's what I sensed.
You know, they know each other backwards and forwards. You know, in fact, I don't think Lisa is making her debut in this role as Eva, Lisa Davidson, but the others, the Wagner, the Walter, the Beckmesser, and the Sachs are all in the Bayreuth cast.
Okay.
So they all know each other, you know. And,
well, the performance that I saw certainly benefited from that. It wasn't.
Well, there's a unity, but also, you know, and Mikael fit in beautifully. But I was there from the first day rehearsing, and I think it's incumbent on the conductor to really bring the people together, so that you know, to make a real ensemble. It's an ensemble piece. I mean, of the top, you need the top level, of course, but it is an ensemble piece nonetheless.
Now I know you've conducted this at Covent Garden, right? and I don't know where else.
I conducted in Brussels for the first time, and my Hans Sachs was José Van Damme. Can you imagine? Yeah. Lucky me. 1993, I conducted this piece for the first time. What I knew about Meistersinger, you could write on a postage stamp at the time. But I've always thought I was a good musician, so I learned it really, really well. And to hear that voice that had such an ease and such a serenity about it. It was not a restless voice, and maybe perhaps not as multidimensional as Michael, but the sheer beauty and the inner serenity of that voice just. I mean, I was left transfixed, and I don't know if you know a name, Dale Dusing. Dale Dusing was the Beckmesser, and I'll just never forget those two. Because, as we say in England, they were chalk and cheese. They were so different one from the other, completely. And it gave me an in to the piece that I brought with me. And I've conducted the piece, I wouldn't say regularly over all those years, but a few times, and I always come back to it. You know, even though it's a marathon. You know, I mean, yeah. Somebody pointed out to me that the marathon winner time was about the length of the third act of Die Meistersinger. You know, so, but it's an you know what I ask myself, of course, is that why in a comedy would Wagner stretch the length to such a degree? And of course with him, you know, he's always trying to pass on a message. You know, in The Ring he does it by repeating the story you know, you have the monologues where you need to find out the information again so that you are prepared to get the next bit of information. It's like you have to pay the price in a way, you know. Here, the entanglements are very interesting. I mean, on the surface, you have a love story, and you have obviously it's obvious that from the beginning the tenor's going to get the girl, you know, but the complications, the working out of the psychology of each character, and the working out, one of the great things of this piece, of course, is the relationship between Sachs and Eva. And, you know, he has lost his wife, he has lost his children, and Eva has always been a part of his life, and he has held her, and he has imagined perhaps a future, maybe when she was old enough, a future with her. He could have, he's the best poet, he's the best singer, he's, you know, and then there's this interloper, you know, this Walter, and he sees the writing on the wall. But in their duets, you feel the warmth, you feel the almost could be of, and in fact when she, in the second duet in Act 3, when she bursts forth, when he somehow has to get all this pent up resentment that is built up, because it is his day has gone by. He is not going to get the girl. There's a new guy there. And he just comes out somehow, and she says, all of this would have been impossible without I love you so much, she says. I mean, she expresses it even passionately. It's almost to the point of it being erotic. Because it's the most Tristan-like music in the piece. I mean, there is another episode in Act 2 between Walter and Eva that is very the burning Tristan, the beginning of the second act love duet. It has those elements, but it doesn't have eroticism. It just has a restless love, you know. But here, there's a component that should make us think. That somehow, even she is somehow making a sacrifice, because she knows she has to just be the young girl that she is and go with that way. But my God, when she finishes, and all he has left to say is, mein Kind, he doesn't want to be a Tristan and Isolde. He doesn't want to be, a King Mark, and be an older husband so that she can be taken away by a younger man. It's heartbreaking, really. And he quotes himself, as we know, and what was very beautiful. We started speaking when that moment came in the first orchestra rehearsal, and all the people who hadn't played the orchestra went, "What?" That's and the audience does. They kind of giggle or they that air of recognition when they hear that of Tristan and the King Mark theme. That's beautiful because it should surprise us.
Now you mentioned that what you knew about Meistersinger nearly 30 years ago, you could have put on a postage stamp. Have you learned something new this time? Do you learn at each encounter? Have you learned something new in 2021?
Yeah. Well, every time you conduct a piece like this, I said to you before, I speak German. I speak German quite well, but when you're conducting, of course, you can see the words, but the music is going by faster. So you know sort of what's going on, but you're not, because you're not able to speak each word. You're supporting each word or accompanying each word. The detail of it, a precise expression of everything, and its musical guise, how Wagner treated every word. Every single thing is somehow treated or underlined or supported. You get better and better at doing that. It takes more than studying the music. You just have to study the libretto over and over and over again, to the point now where I can read the libretto and I know every single tune, every single musical moment of what the libretto is. Now that sounds like, of course you can. No, not of course you can. Because I bet, when you've conducted a piece once, twice, you can't remember what's what. Generally you can. But now I'm at home with the moments, with the situations, with the irony, the sarcasm, the poetry, the pictures of nature that Walter paints in his arias, which I have to say, from a text point of view, I find overly flowery. Yes, I find them embarrassingly flowery, but the music's sensational. Yeah, I just don't think Wagner is at his best as a poet there. He's better with sarcasm and with reflection. Dare I say it? Sue me.
And you've mentioned the unavoidable fact of the length, the span of this opera, and I'm wondering about the challenges of that. First, from the point of view of stamina, but also from the point of view of architecture. How do you make these huge, a 2-hour-long act? How do you make sure that it's balanced, that things flow naturally, that the climaxes come in the right place? I mean, this must be, you must have like a blueprint in your mind of what you're looking for.
Well, you do. You develop one over much time.
Yeah.
The thing is that you've got to remember that the conductors that conducted these pieces, early on, and in the old country and in Europe in general, and in the early days here, conducted those pieces over and over and over again. This wasn't, I'm going to do Die Meistersinger, and it's like a once in a lifetime thing. No, they'd conduct Meistersinger, twice a year, and maybe in different productions, and the conductors of the era. Now, you know, my God, I've been so lucky that I've been able to come back to this piece over and over again, to be able to figure out what the pacing is physically and structurally. Now, basically, it's this. Act 1 is just 3 sections, though it lasts an hour and 20 minutes, or hour 15, hour 20. It's the overture and the first scene, the David explaining of the verses and the rhymes, how to become a Meistersinger to Walter, and then the entrance of the Meisters and the trial that follows. It's 3 sections. Now, obviously, the third of those sections is quite long. It's quite long, but there's great amount of storytelling there. There's an issue. Beckmesser's trying to get Wagner to not have Eva take part in the decision about who she chooses as her betrothed. Wagner has an announcement to make that he's going to give Eva over as the prize for winning the Meistersinger competition. We have the introduction of Walter into the guild and his trial, and all the discussions around that, and all the explanation of, there's much dilly-dallying before you get to the meat of the matter. But it's all one scene. But you have to follow the story. You have to be a stage director. You have to be telling the story. You have to be in love with the narrative, that story, and how he introduces himself with the first aria, am stillen Herd, and where he learned from Walter von der Vogelweide, and how he even tells the story of his masters in verse. But then he sings the real song later, which is a real, as far as they're concerned, it's rock music. I mean, as far as the Meisters are concerned, it's just something out of, just makes them dizzy. But look, and that brings you to the end of the act. So it's very simple when I say it. It took me years to be able to just see it as that, as a conductor, to follow it through.
So in other words, it takes years of experience to find the simplicity of it.
Absolutely. Now, of course, in the second act, the challenges are different. It's much shorter. I mentioned this horrific fight at the end, which is so complex in its the composition of it. It's just crazy, as it is portrayed. So that's technically demanding, and you have to know who's with who, and how you have to figure out how to rehearse it. That takes a good 2 or 3 productions to figure out how do you rehearse this. How do you instead of just everybody screaming their brains out. First act, the second act starts off with the apprentices, lovely, but you need the perfume of the night. And this is the key to the second act, which sets up this little discourse between Wagner and his daughter. And you get a feel of the smell of the elder tree, the elder flower. And this sets up the aria of Hans Sachs' first aria. And my crazy song that I sang becomes in extreme slow motion. It's a fantastic idea. And this I need to play to you, because he says he talks about Yeah, so he talks about this, where he's thinking, he hears in his head that chord. I feel it, but I can't understand it, he says. We get the strings come in. I can't hold on to it. But I can't forget it. And I can't grab onto it. And I can't measure it. That which is unmeasurable. It's quite tortured. Now I'll play it in a little bit more flowing manner, but you'll hear the slowing down. Sorry. Ich fühl's und kann nicht verstehen. Kann's nicht behalten, doch auch nicht vergessen. Komm slower, fass ich es ganz, kann ich nicht messen. Auch wie Wort, auch messen. So he could have done this, listen. And that would have made sense. But by stretching it, we find this him grappling with the idea of this new music. So what is he doing here? He's repeating, he's making this theme obsessional. But under the bass line is doing this, listen. It's going deeper and deeper inside him. And it just goes to the bottom of him. It's the most fantastic thing. And so we have a man who is who has grown up in a tradition and is the example, the shining light, the beacon of that tradition, grappling with the new. That's fantastic. And musically, Wagner does this and shows how difficult it is for him. And yet he wants to understand it, but can't measure it. It's just fantastic, no? So this smell. So now I understood. I remember the question. The night air, creating the atmosphere for that kind of contemplation and thought, which then becomes the machinations of Eva, then worried about what's going to happen, and she's going to find out information. And how did he sing at the trial? And so there's the first duet. So here again, story, moment of contemplation, and then story. And then we have the whole Beckmesser, where she meets up with the tenor first, and then we have Beckmesser's entrance. And Beckmesser wants the help of Sax to help him sing this song to who he thinks is Evchen up in the window. And we get this, what starts out quite amorphously and free, becomes ever more, starts to wind up and become then, it goes on a treadmill that then becomes just violent. So it's a fantastic lesson in the sort of the turning of the screw, basically. That's basically what it is. And of course, it's very interesting that he wrote this piece in between finishing, he hadn't quite finished Act 2 of Siegfried. It took 12 years off, I think, to write Tristan and Die Meistersinger. Oh, okay. But the hammering of Siegfried and the cobblering, the shoemaker, the hammering is everywhere. To make points, to make noise, to make a shoe, but to hammer home the message, of whatever the message may be. You hear it in the music all the time, and the sort of the punctiliousness of Beckmesser and this it's nervous character. The way there, you've never seen so many staccatos in certainly in a Wagner score, and that's the point. You could say the same for Falstaff, and it's for composers who are known for their line, and yes, big moments, big gestures, thrust, and all that, but and huge melody and long line. But here it's more the small notes. It's the which create the chatter in the score, which create the chatter in the orchestra, and the woodwinds, and you it's unbelievable. And the more they sound like chickens or like gossipy people, the better. But it's against what one would think is the ethos about things Wagnerian. And that's what makes it such a joy for me when I'm conducting this piece. I'm just happy. I'm really happy. I mean, there are certain moments I have to, sort of gear up for, and like, okay, the seatbelt goes on here, But other than that, it's a life affirming, because the rhythm of it, the what it says about music, the short, the long, the hard, the soft, the plaintive, the sweet, and everything you can imagine about the delivery of music is in this music. It's just beautiful. It's a compendium in that way.
Do you care to talk about, you've sort of analyzed Acts 1 and 2, do you care to go to Act 3?
Yeah, Act 3 is in two parts.
Of all, yeah.
It's part 1 and part 2, that's it.
Okay.
No, of course, part 1 is 90 minutes almost, and when you think of that. There's a moment that's worse, and that's after 45 minutes and you turn the page of Götterdämmer of the first act of Götterdämmer, and it says Act 1. That is that's a heart attack moment. But here, well, in all third acts of Wagner operas, we enter a new dimension. I can name you, you say Tristan, Parsifal, Lohengrin, and certainly the Ring operas. And in Act 3, that which is the fallout from the violence has to be, Wagner believes that you have to deal with this information. There's been a terrible happening, or that people have come to blows over somebody singing too loud in the night, or misunderstanding, or David is jealous of Beckmesser because he sees that he's singing to Magdalena. Well, Beckmesser thinks it's Eva. But anyway, David doesn't know that, and so he hits him and starts violence, and all this has to be reckoned with. Therefore, you need a moment of contemplation, and I mean, you can't have a bigger contrast to the goings on of Act 1 and Act 2 than and we have the fugue will come there, there's voices will enter. Of course, Mr. Bach is everywhere too, huh? Society has gone to hell in a handbasket there. But out of that comes hope. So there is redemption. There's in the darkest moments of darkest despair. And we have to have the lesson between Sachs and Walter, and we have to hear Walter's song being composed. And I mean, and a tremendous challenge for the tenor, because he has to sing these verses over and over and over again, and it lies in a funny place. If you have a facility for it, and it goes, but if you don't, it's really quite difficult. Right. And but the cleverness of it, is one can discuss that, but it is Wagner showing how basically how to create, using the prompting of Sachs to who says, no, the Meisters, if you do it that way, the Meisters might get a little bit angry if you do that, if you finish the second verse not like you did the first verse. Because you need a first verse, a second verse that are exactly the same, and then in the after song you have different rhymes and different, and you wrap it up, etc., etc. And so it's a lesson about creativity, and of course Wagner will stop the action to teach us, basically. Mm-hmm. And I think that's, well, then Eva comes in, and we get another duet, and where she's again impatient for information, and she's complaining about her shoe, and that's not really it, and and then the tenor appears, and she goes, ah, and she's lost, and we have the ceremony of the baptism of the song, because each new creation must be baptized, and so there's a beautiful. It's in archaic musical set, in an archaic musical setting, we have a beautiful traditional baptism, and then in the most modern, coming together, 5 people each speaking their own thoughts, we have this ravishing quintet, which is completely new, and it's like it's as if Wagner is somehow infecting, influencing, taking over the lives of of everyone. In fact, Eva now sings like she hasn't sung ever before. She sung dum 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 ding dum ding dum dum and da 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 dum little phrases blah, 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 and fine and she sung Sag's mein Freund, you know, that kind of thing, and very rhapsodically, but she's never sang a line, a really long line, and here for the first time she does. And the only other moment you'll hear her sing now from now on is la ra 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 ri ra ri, which is Walter's music.
Right.
So she has been taken in, she has been transformed musically. She's no longer tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. It's fantastic, actually. So what it's wonderful. So, and then the orchestra is half dead, and then the curtain opens to the chorus, and it's a fantastic psychological moment, because of once the chorus starts singing, the orchestra all of a sudden just wakes up. They take energy from, you know, the chorus is fresh as a daisy. They've had the break plus 90 minutes, and they're raring to go. You know, and it is. You know, there's such a great theatre man that Wagner was, that he somehow knew that this would bring the orchestra to life again, and that's what happens. And then you have the singing contest, and it's silly goings on with Beckmesser, and it's funny, and it's heartbreaking, you know. And then the guy sings the song, and you have and everybody goes up to the high C, and of course. We have two very important monologues of Hans Sachs. The first one, the honor of being chosen as the speaker of the day, and in preparation for the contest, and that's all very, very formal. And then there's the big surprise is that Walter says, no, after winning the prize, says, no, I don't want it. And of course, this is a great shock. And he's right in a way, because he doesn't fit into the society. And it would be very interesting to see Die Meistersinger Part 2, to see what really would have happened to Walter in this society. Because he's so full of beans and so full of, you know, he's such another kind of musician. But it would take, society would have to change to fit to him. You know, he'd have to, you know, and I don't know whether that's possible. It's an interesting conundrum. But of course, Hans Sachs becomes offended by this gesture of Walter's, and explains to him that, you know, this society has defended art, and there will be many forces that will try to destroy us, and we must fight against them so that we can protect what is our culture, basically. A phrase that he is doubled down upon during that speech at the urging of Cosima Wagner, the wife of Richard Wagner, saying, you need to underline that more, you need to underline that more. And his heart is not in it. I really sense that Wagner's heart is not in it, because he uses such a flimsy device. To something that is, first of all, for the most part, in C major. He, you know, talks about the Meisters and the guilds and all that, and that which have supported the guilds. And he says, beware. And that, all of a sudden, it sounds like either a bad Italian opera or a silent movie. Watch out, there will be forces that will threaten us. And I think that's not good. That's not Meistersinger. That's something else. It's glued upon. It's glued on.
I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
Because that is, of course, the passage that people find most troubling.
Yes.
In the war. Could it be cut?
No, because we associate nationalism with Nazi, with the whole Nazi movement, and they're not the same thing.
Okay.
You know, unfortunately, we've lived, you know, the 20th century was something that turned this stuff into, you know, look, he was anti-Semitic, we know that. He was perhaps probably not the nicest person in the world, but he was a man of tremendous talent and vision. And he'll be the first one to tell you. But something like this is, especially that it's written so artificially and so haphazardly, I feel, that he really just wanted to make her happy. And because there's much to celebrate in this piece. It doesn't need to be cut. I think that you could say the same. I think every country, every culture is worried about outside influence. I think that America is certainly not excluded from the list of countries, you know, and we're the melting pot. There's so many influences here. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The idea of America is but so how do you protect something that is already a mishmash of its own? Do you see? Here he's talking about something that is absolutely crystal clear and over hundreds and hundreds of years. You know? But defending art. I think right now, what do we? Those of us who love art and love music and who love art in general, theatre, whatever, what have you. If we don't defend it, it's not going to exist anymore. We have to defend. We're in a position to defend it. It's not the same as this kind of defending. But in our way, we must defend what we love, and we must try to keep the flame alive. You know.
So now that we've come to the man himself, we are here as guests of the Wagner Society, and you conduct many great composers, all of them deserving of reverence, Verdi or Baird or whatever. What is it about Wagner? There aren't Verdi societies, at least not here in America. What is it about Wagner?
There is in Parma.
In Parma. That's a special case.
They have, you know, I have to tell you about the Parma. You know, there are 27 operas of Verdi. And to become part of this special society, there are 27 members, each with the name of the opera. And they hold it for life. So it's revered, this position is like, you know, sacrosanct. Just by the by. And I have met Mr. Rigoletto, Mr. Due Foscari, and Mr. Aida, and, you know, so they haven't.
But I do think that's, and of course the Parma is a special case, and he's the native son. But I do think there's something about Wagner that attracts a kind of passionate commitment. I have trouble saying this because I'm passionately committed to my love of Verdi. But there is, Wagner does strike me as a separate case, and the phenomenon of people who go around the world seeking out Wagner productions. And do you have any thoughts of what about this composer might cause that?
Well, I'm going to try to answer a question in a couple of different ways. People say to me, you know, after conducting the Meistersinger, oh, you must be exhausted, you know. And of course I'm tired, and I feel like somebody, you know, hit me with a baseball bat at the end of it. But I'm much more tired at the end of Rigoletto, at the end of Otello. That's because there's somehow there's less balance between the head and the heart. In the Italian operas, this is not a comparison or a competition. It's not that. I'm talking about me as an Italo-Anglo-American. I somehow just, with Italian opera, I can't help it. It the passions that it stirs in me. But to conduct something like the Meistersinger, I need, in a lot of moments, I need a really cool head, and I need a certain lucidity and awareness of what's going on, plus the passion and the direction and all that. I said this because I think that which attracts Wagnerians to Wagner is the completeness of it all, the literary, the intellectual, the philosophical, the musical, the accumulative nature of those works of art, of the operas. I mentioned this new dimension that all third acts of Wagner operas go into. The journey of it is like a mini pilgrimage each time, and each performance of a Wagner opera is an event. It's not just an opera performance, it's an event. And you've obviously set aside time for it, you've thought about it, you might even have prepared for it. Something which you probably rarely do if you went to see Rigoletto, Now, Rigoletto is a work of perfection in half the time.
Right.
I mean, dramaturgically, it's just, I conducted it for the first time. I hadn't conducted it for 29 years. I just conducted it before this.
Oh.
For some reason, it just escaped me. And I have to reinvent myself to conduct that music. I have to reinvent myself when I come to this music. Mm-hmm. This music, for some reason, in this pit with this orchestra, I felt comfortable sitting down with them as if we're around a table. Mm-hmm. Like, because the winds are very close to me, and I felt like I was just serving pasta or something, I felt all very collegial. Mm-hmm. It was very, very nice, and but that completeness of the experience, I think, is what urges Wagnerians to continue on to the journey of it, to continue on to understand. I'm sure some of you are musicians, but you're probably not musicians like I am. So if I'm saying, that I need to a few times to really, find my way, in the Meistersinger, I would imagine that the same goes for you, and and with the other operas, and you keep coming back to it because there's so much to search for. Now, is it everybody's idea of an entertaining evening in the theater? Absolutely not. But it's it's an experience that has to be looked at and approached in a different way.
I have to say, for myself, someone who's known Meistersinger from most of my life, I think it was the very first opera I ever saw from that as a kid. And I see a performance like the one I saw Thursday night, you keep finding out something new. The piece always has new vistas to present to you.
I think, there have been 7 years since the last revival, and that gave me an opportunity to sort of not be too much compared or associated with Jimmy and how Jimmy conducts it. And we conducted it completely differently.
Yes.
Totally. And I think both valid. I mean, my God, Levine conducted so beautifully. It is incredible. But there's, I think with with great masterpieces, there's room to see them through, different prisms, and generations will. It's a generational thing too, I mean, the kids that are coming up behind me, I'm sure are going to conduct this piece differently and should, as long as they are well studied. I can't abide sort of what I would call arbitrariness, because I think you have to, with this stuff, you have to devote your life to it, and go through the ordeal, the punishing ordeal that is the learning and coming to grips with the texts and the words, and which some of the Germans have trouble understanding, really. The ideas, but you just do it over and over and over again, and learn. I'm right now I'm so hungry to get my teeth into Parsifal again, and I've done it twice in 2 different productions, and that's the piece that I yearn for right now.
Do you have one scheduled?
No, that's what makes me crazy. That's what makes me crazy, and so that's driving me nuts. But
well, you mentioned the joy you felt. Now I know it isn't an A equals A equation, because you felt joyful, it was ergo a joyful performance. But in fact, it was, and I don't think I'd ever quite appreciated the work's joyfulness as much as I did when you were conducting it. So thank you for that.
No, thank you.
And what have we left out?
Well, you can, I think it's absolutely incredible that Met, not only that it opened, that it decided to keep a title like Die Meistersinger. Because I thought, even up until 2 weeks before my wife and I came to America, I mean, first of all, we never thought we'd have to come, because for sure it would be, the Met wouldn't open because the contract negotiations and this and that, and for sure Meistersinger would be out of the question, because 6 hours in a mask and all that stuff. But they did it, and we did it, and I think that speaks a lot about the city, the resilience, and the desire for things to get moving again and to get started, and come on, we can do this, and that the kind of spirit that it takes to actually put the piece on, but even actually do it, perform it. I think the audience needs that kind of gumption and courage to actually come to the theater and sit through it, because I think it is a challenge, but the audience is showing, and with each performance there are more and more people, and we had a really good turnout yesterday, and of course it's easier on the matinee performances. It's a little bit more reasonable. You're thinking about dinner afterwards. That's what gets me through the third act, that's for sure.
Well, our time is waning, and
Okay.
I think I've learned, as I said, I learned a lot about Meistersinger the other night, and I've learned yet more today. I want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you.